Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. We're going to be starting in just about 1 minute, and we'll be talking to you real soon. All right, hello, everyone. Thanks for today's webinar on Jenkins X, hands-on demonstration. Just want to let everyone know a few things up top before we get started. One, we are recording, so if you have a colleague who's unable to join or maybe you have to leave early, you will be able to view this later. Two, we will have time at the end for questions. So as soon as you think of a question, even if you think maybe we'll get to it, please go right ahead and ask it right in that question panel. It's always good to know what you're looking to know about, and we're looking to help answer these. I don't want to take up too much more time before we get started, and that's really all I have to say up top. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker for today, Oscar Medina. Oscar.
Thanks, Max. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you being here today. I'm excited to start this new series where we walk you through multiple real-world scenarios using Jenkins X. And as you know, this is the beginning, the first one. So I'm looking to walk you through some basics, right? And explain some of the things that are what Jenkins X is and what it isn't. And I have my colleague, Viktor, with me. We've done several workshops together. And so what I want to do is go ahead and that's Viktor right there. And that's me, by the way. Here's what we're covering today, right? I want to briefly describe what Jenkins X is. I want to make sure we are all clear. And I then want to walk you through how to create a project in Jenkins X, meaning an application, right? And then lastly, I want to show you how to import an existing application or GitHub repo in this case, right? So those are the key things that I want to cover with you today. But there's something critical that I want to make sure we cover before getting started with the hands-on stuff. And like I said, I don't have many slides after this, by the way, but I want to make sure that we're clear what Jenkins X is. And I think, you know, I can certainly tell you, but I love the way Viktor explains it. So I want him to tell you this, and then we get started with the hands-on stuff. Viktor?
Okay, so explaining what is Jenkins X. So Jenkins X is anything but Jenkins. So it's a completely rewritten new solution written from scratch with the goal of being very opinionated continuous delivery solution for and inside Kubernetes. So the scope is much smaller than Jenkins. Scope is Kubernetes only, right? Jenkins can do anything anywhere. Jenkins X does things only inside of Kubernetes. And Jenkins without X can do anything in any way you want. This is opinionated. This tells you this is how you do stuff. If what Jenkins X tells you, if the process behind Jenkins X fits your needs, great. If it doesn't, then you might want to look for alternatives. So opinionated, cloud native, Kubernetes first, CD, written from scratch.
Yep.
Does it work as explanation, Oscar?
That works wonderfully. And I think I really like the fact that you mentioned that it's written from scratch, right? So many people have the concept of, some code lingering that is part of Jenkins, which is not. This is completely new. And so with that, I thank you, Victor. And with that, I want to move into our actual terminal and start doing some stuff, right? So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and I want to show everyone how to create an application. Now, an application.
No. You wanted to show everyone your car.
Oh yeah, well that's also true because I customized my terminal. So thank you for highlighting that. there's the Jenkins X plate right there actually. What we want to do is just show you real quick. Jenkins X comes with QuickStart, what we call, which you can then tailor to your needs. You can start from a Node.js application, a Python, etc. Multiple languages, right? So in fact, what I'm going to do is say to create my QuickStart or sample application, JX create QuickStart. Now I can pass it additional flags and have it do it all, automatically. But I don't want to do that because in this demonstration, I want to show you what options you have available, right? So I'm going to hit enter. And now it's going to tell me, well, first of all, notice that in my terminal, I'm actually in a repository or a local directory where I usually like to place all repositories. So that's where it's going to be created. Now, the question is asking me is, hey, which QuickStart do you want to use? We have Android, Angular, ASP.NET, we have Golang, a lot of different QuickStarts. One of the things we will work in the future to do is to give you a little more descriptive information as to what each one does. For now, what I'd like to do is actually show you one that I created myself, which is just, it showcases feature flags from rollout. It's a very different topic. It just looks pretty, so I wanted to show you that. The next question is, hey, what account on GitHub do you want to use as the account creating this repository? And so I have a bot configured for Jenkins X, which handles the pipelines and all that stuff, the automation. But I don't want to use that. I want to use my own GitHub account. So I select that. And then I also I'm personally part of several organizations in GitHub. So the one I created, which is a fictitious one, is called Jenkins Oscar, right? So I'm going to create that repository in that organization and hit enter. The repository name, I'm going to say cool cars. And that will be the name of the app, by the way. So just know that, like, once you do that, you're pretty stuck with it for the most part. You may be able to change it, but there's a lot of places where this gets tagged. And so you see that it's creating the repository in the right organization. And it's asking me, do I want to initialize the Git repository? Of course I do. Notice how it's capitalized. That means if I hit enter, it automatically defaults to that. That's what that means. Also, the commit message is always defaulted to this, so I don't need to type it. But if you have a standard, obviously you want to type it here. I'm just going to hit enter. Now, what's happening here is pretty interesting, right? Because one of the things, and one of the powerful features of Jenkins X is that it has the build packs for different types of applications and languages. It detected at this rate that this was a JavaScript application. And in fact, it is. It's a Node.js application. So it did all that. And what I'm going to do is show you the activity. We can execute this command to figure out what's happening, because what happens is as soon as we created that and hit enter, it triggered a pipeline. And the pipeline is a Tecton pipeline, which is telling, based off that build pack, which is the Node.js or JavaScript in this case, to say, execute all of these commands. Now you can see the status of all of these things happening, right? And because it's an NPM, a a Node.js, guess what we have? We already did this for you, right? So this is a good takeaway. If you use build packs, we're already doing the standard npm install, npm test. And so what this means is that you're accelerating your way into publishing this application into any given environment, right? In this case, it will actually end up being published first to the staging environment. Now, one thing I'd like to highlight, however, is this right here, the build npm test. Now, every Node.js developer out there knows that the JSON package, the package.json file to be specific, you can specify a command that says execute this test. Now, if I did customize that, right, then the test would actually execute and you have nothing to do on your end. Either that was included, right? Now you can do that and modify it, and your test will execute automatically with the default JavaScript or build pack pipeline for this type of application, right? This is one of the great benefits of actually using Jenkins X. You don't have to do a lot from the get-go to get started. So let's take a look at the status here. So a lot of stuff is happening. You know, I'm just scrolling down. Oh, look, it looks like I have failed. Looks like I failed to actually do something here. So what happened? Well, I can take a look. I could say JX get build logs, right? And then the pipeline that we're executing is actually this one right here, right? We're creating that application. So I can actually trace and see what happened. And so it's telling me that it's somehow stopped, right? So that's okay. I'm not worried about that. There may be something in my system that didn't quite work. And so let's say I want to, if I do JX get applications to see what's published there that Jenkins X knows about, did it actually publish it? No, it has a previous application that I did, right? So you can see there. So this whole thing did not go through, but don't despair. We can actually still try to recreate this. And if I actually look at the local directory, you would see that it actually did create the local directory with some of the stuff that we need to look at. But I'm not going to show you that now. What I'd like to do is take a step back and then run this again with just a different build pack altogether. So what I'm going to do is run that command again with another type of build pack. Not sure why I'm getting this particular message. I just created this cluster. Again, this is just so everyone's expectations are set. We're doing this live. It's all happening live, so there's not a lot of prep work. You'll see these things, but what I believe it will show you is also how to tackle these scenarios, right? So it's very valuable. For now, I think you've seen that if you wanted to explore details as to what's happening with the particular pipeline, in this case, the one named this, you can quickly tail the logs using this command and be able to quickly see what's happening. Now, this one in particular is actually new for me, the build pack. For some reason, it could have been a recent update in my Jenkins X binaries. Realize that we're basically running cutting edge in the latest version, at least I am. So for that means that some of the things are experimental, may fail, etc. This feature has been around for a long time, so I don't expect it to fail like this. So what I want to do is try to work through this again and do a quick start. And I'm just going to choose an entirely different basic Node.js quick start, right? And I'll show you what that one is. So if I start typing, it starts filtering it out. This one in particular is sort of the extremely basic skeleton-like, Node.js server application that just emits a quick message. So I'm going to do that to create a new quick start, and I'm going to say, yes, I want to use my personal GitHub account. and I want to put that repository in this organization, fictitious organization. So I will do that again. I'm going to call it test node app. And I want to initialize it. I'm going to hit enter, enter again. So again, it's detecting that application, because it's a QuickStart based on Node.js. Yeah, it selected the builder or the build pack that is for JavaScript. So it's doing that. Now, while that is happening, right, I can actually do a couple of things. Again, I can look at the activities for that pipeline in real time. So I'm gonna just, all I did was copy that, which it suggested I do, right? But I'm also going to say JX get build logs, and I'm going to select this pipeline right here, highlight it, because I want to see the actual logs. So now I have two terminals. One is showing me the status of the pipeline high level, and then the other one is showing me the detail at the bottom of what is happening, right? So some of the things I see happening in the bottom is that we've, it's already building your image. We store the image in Chart Museum, right? And that's part of where your Helm chart packaged applications are stored. That's just the standard to deploy Kubernetes applications. So we leverage all the best practices, right? So there it is. It's now, as you can see at the bottom, there is doing a pull request, and we'll get into details as to how to pull requests and all that works in future sessions. That is covered under the whole GitHub's topic. But know that any configuration changes to your application happen via pull request. So you have a single source of the truth, right? And so right now what's happening, it is essentially promoting my application to the staging environment, which by default has been set up when I installed Jenkins X in my Kubernetes cluster. And all that I did with a single command. Now you may ask, why didn't we see that right now? Well, we wanted to start from the capability, showing you the capabilities of using the platform versus installing it, right? And if by the way, if you feel compelled to have a session where we walk you through the install on a given cloud provider, please suggest that at the end or ask, and we're happy to do that, right? This is pretty free form, so it's not tied up to any formalities. I'd love to be able to get your feedback on that. So back to what's happening here. It looks like our application has been, a pull request for our staging environment has been created. So if I click on this, you will see that the bot, right? So Jenkins X bot has done several things here, and it's already looking to publish the application in the staging environment. This is my staging environment GitHub repository. So everything is versioned. You don't need to worry about every version of an application is deployed there. You could roll back, you can roll forward, etc. Just know that that's what's happening in the background. And perhaps this seems very familiar with you in terms of what the GitHub UI looks like, right? It was merged. So it looks like this version of the app, 001, is published in our staging environment. Now, how do we verify that? Well, so what I would like to do, it looks like our entire process or pipeline has finished. It usually remains in this state right here that you see on the top terminal, right? The pull request succeeded, and at that point, we're done. So what I'm gonna do is say, there's a way to find out how many applications and what applications are deployed in your Jenkins X environment. So JX get applications is all it takes. And in fact, here's the other one there that I did, but that's not the one we're dealing with right now. It's this one here called test node app. So if I click on that, it should show me, there it is, right? That is how you create a new project in Jenkins X based on a QuickStart. Pretty simple, right? This is just a server.js file And in fact, before I move on to our next step, what I will do is actually show you what the structure is for that application real quick. So test node app, I'll open it in Visual Studio Code, right? And this is what it did. I'll quickly just walk through it. As I mentioned, every application in Jenkins X is packaged as a Helm chart. So when you look at this, there are two folders. One of them is actually the Helm chart application here, but we also create what we call a preview chart. And that preview chart is for preview environments, okay? And we'll get into those in our second session, how to, basically the workflow that we will do is show you how to move from making changes to the application via pull request and seeing those changes in a preview environment, right? So I don't want to derail from today, but just know that that's coming in our second session. And so what matters here in every application that Jenkins X has is that if you notice our pipeline file, typically for those coming in from Jenkins world, you'd have a Jenkins file. In our case now, it's a YAML file called Jenkins-X. In this file is where we would eventually, in future sessions, show you how to customize the pipeline. And we would then extend the pipeline for this build pack as an example to include our own steps. You know, we might choose to do some pulling secrets from Kubernetes and setting them in some environment variables and some other good stuff, right? Just know that that's coming. But that is a file that remains in your application deployed to Jenkins X, as well as the Scaffold. We use Scaffold. So that is all about creating a new project in Jenkins X. Now, we have that application. You saw it in the browser. What I'd like to do now is go over to my browser, and I'm going into my own personal GitHub account, and I have a fictitious GitHub organization, as I mentioned. And there's an application that I'd like to actually import, right? As a new, like, I think Viktor said it correctly in one of his presentations. The world, you know, didn't happen just today. Like, it's been around for a while or something along those lines. So the same thing applies to your applications, right? You created them, you invested time, you've been deploying them for, you know, years and whatnot, whatever the case is. So we're talking about an existing application now, right? How do you import that into Jenkins X and make it work, right? So the application that I'd like to show you as an example is this one. I called it Ski App. I'm just a big ski bum. And so I created this sort of simple Node.js application. I have some basic notes to myself as to what to do to reuse this application as a demo, by the way, but this is what it will look like, right? And it's an application that uses, you know, randomly shows you pictures here of different sort of themed snow and ski pictures, which is pretty cool in my mind. Uses Bootstrap. Great way to show your team's peers if you ever need to showcase what Jenkins X is. In fact, this application is public. You are free to clone it and do whatever you need to after, you know, at any given point. So, okay. So here I have my application, and I have my master branch, which is what we're going to clone. And I have an original branch, which keeps track of, you know, the non-imported one. You don't need to worry about that for now. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's clone this, right? So I'm going to copy this. Here's the scenario. We're about to import an application that our enterprise we've been working on. We've been collaborating with other developers, all good. So now we're ready to test, you know, kick the tires with Jenkins X with an existing project. So let's go ahead and do this. Let me just make sure that I do not have it here. Nope, it's not there. All right, so git clone. And of course, I'm going to clone it. So same name. And now what I'd like to do is say code skiapp, because I actually like to view the contents. So you can see this application has nothing to do with Jenkins X, right? There's nothing here that indicates it is a Jenkins X application or previously imported. It's a basic containerized application that you can deploy on its own in Kubernetes, irrespective of you running Jenkins X or not, right? So it is there. Our next step is going to be, so I'm going to just use the terminal here to keep us sane. What I'd like to do, and if you look at the README here, I have some instructions for resetting it after the demo, but I've done that already for you. So the real command that we need to do here is JX import, right? Now, Victor might correct me on this and add another flag to basically do it in silence mode, which you can, right? But I'd like to actually not pass too many flags to be able to see what's happening in the importing environment and what it's going to ask me a few questions. So I want to first get to know the environment or the system by letting me know what it's expecting, right? But you can avoid all those questions and say, just import it. We won't do that today is what I'm saying. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm at the root of the application. So I'm in the actual skiapp application. I cloned it from GitHub. And now I'm ready to import it into Jenkins X for the first time. Pretty exciting, right? So let's take a look. So I'm gonna say JX import. And by the way, just so you know, I could have, in this command, passed a URL to the GitHub repository as well. So I didn't necessarily have to clone it locally. Just know that I prefer to clone it locally, and that's that. But you can pass it the GitHub URL and do the same thing. And now I'm just going to select my personal GitHub account, which is that. Again, it's going through the process of detecting what type of application is being imported. It is creating a GitHub, several things. It added the files. Notice how now in my directory, I have my charts directory with the app chart in the preview that we talked about. It added the Jenkins YAML file. It added the YAML for Scaffold. And those are a few things that are added as soon as you execute that command, right? But now we want to take a look at what's going on. So whenever you want to do that, all you have to do is execute the get activities for that application. So again, this is an existing one, right? If I go into my package JSON, I want to show you what I have here. Notice how my scripts, my test script has a call to Mocha to test whatever Mocha scripts are there. Now I have a simple test script for my homepage to run it and just check that it returns the 200 code from the web server. That is it, right? Pretty basic. So it's going to run that is what I'm saying. So looking at here, when it executes this command, oh, it looks like it did already. So if I get build logs, and of course, it's going to be the first skiapp pipeline, which is this one. Here's that test being executed, right there. And why was that executed? Well, because in our package file, again, our package JSON, I already had said, hey, by the way, we do our test and we run this. So know that. And we picked it up from Jenkins X side and said, yeah, no problem. We'll execute that. There is the response. My test pass. It's all good. And now what it's doing is actually doing a few other things in the background, right? Creating the image. It is because this cluster is actually in Google Cloud. It is essentially creating an image and storing it in their image registry, which we use by default. And there's a few other things happening where it's creating the Helm chart version, the first version to be published to Chart Museum. That is also happening right now in the background. If just scrolling down here through the logs on the bottom terminal, right? And you can see, in this case, here's the version that will get promoted into my staging environment, right? So it looks like it all happened successfully, and we should be able to, at this point or fairly soon, it doesn't happen right away. Now, as everyone knows, you know, modifying ingress process or objects in Kubernetes and all that is not like in seconds. It takes a little while. So one thing I want to highlight is if I go here, at least Jenkins X has already said that the ski app version 006 should be in our staging environment, right? And it added that into the repo. I wanted to show you what that looks like. So if you're ever curious what's published into the staging environment, all you have to do is actually look at the requirements.yaml. And there it tells you all the applications that are in the staging environment. Now notice how that includes also our Jenkins X default objects like the expose controller, which helps expose your applications. It also, here's our application that was just published. And then of course it has the previous ones that I've done, right? So that is how importing an application works. Now the question is, can we access that? Again, remember that command, how to get applications that are currently deployed? It's jx get applications. All right, it looks like it's right there. So, you know, I'm gonna click on it. There it is. Oh man, I can't wait for winter now. Okay, well, that is the process of how to import an existing application, right? Now, there's a lot of stuff here to digest. Just know, look, I'm using a custom domain, all of that. I'm also naming your staging environment can be different, securing this with SSL. All of that is coming up in subsequent sessions that Victor and I will be glad to show you. So let me go back here to our presentation. I think we might have, yeah, no, that I think we covered our bullet points today. Excellent. Max, do we want to open it up for questions?
We can do a few, sure. We've got some come in, and as we ask these questions, just remember you continue to ask them as we go for everyone watching. And also, I failed to mention this earlier, but at the very end, when I close this out, a very short survey just asking what you thought and what you'd like to hear about in the future will pop up. If you're still on, would be willing to answer that. We'd really appreciate it. Anyway, let's get to some questions. All right, so I see one come in, and I feel it's the same question has been asked a couple different ways. So I'm going to try to reword it myself a bit here. So we've said that Jenkins X and Jenkins are not the same. What aspects of Jenkins is Jenkins X using, and in what ways are they different beyond that?
So it's a very short answer. No aspects of Jenkins are used by Jenkins X. None. So it is a completely, so let me actually be more precise. In the latest version of Jenkins X, serverless one, not the first iterations, in the next gen or Jenkins X, there is no Jenkins. Not a single line of Jenkins is there, for good or bad. So nothing, no aspects of Jenkins are used in Jenkins X. It is a completely new solution written from scratch, at least the latest version.
All right, Oscar, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, I actually, that was dead on. There's nothing. I just want to make sure folks know that the name, I think in one of our workshops back in DevOps World in San Francisco, one of the folks that attended it and asked the same question, right? And I love the way Victor answered it, which is like, take the word Jenkins out of the whole name of this thing, and there you have it, because it's not. And I'm hoping that that resonates with folks in the future, because all of the technologies that we're using, Helm, Scaffold, you know, Prow, all of that stuff that's in the background and the guts of it, which we will go into detail in future sessions. That is not Jenkins, right? Jenkins is installed as a master, it's deployed in several places. And also, Jenkins X itself is running only in Kubernetes right now to do your native CICD. I think that's, if you can walk away today with that, it will help you tremendously for our future sections.
All right. Just to let everyone know, if for whatever reason we don't fully answer your question, please feel free to just let us know in the question again. We'll get back to it. Also, you mentioned earlier you'd like to hear about what platforms people would like to see Jenkins X run on, and we've had some votes for AWS. Don't know if you want to speak to that at all, if we want to move on, but.
Yes, so,
yeah,
yes.
we will touch base on it because I think Victor has some good insight on that. Actually, we're working on it, right? There's a lot going on.
Here's the story. Jenkins X works in any Kubernetes cluster. Does not really matter whether it's GKE, EKS, IKS, AKS, PKS, or whichever, right? So if you have a Kubernetes cluster, Jenkins X should work. Now now what I said is 100% valid for Jenkins X open source. Now there is equally free Jenkins X distribution, which is a validated version of Jenkins X. Right. And that one today supports only GKE. EKS support is coming, I cannot commit to dates, but it's coming very, very quick soon. And then after that, the rest will follow. But do not take that as Jenkins X works or doesn't work somewhere. It works in any Kubernetes cluster. It's just that certain version of Jenkins X distribution, the full name is cloud-based Jenkins X distribution, is validated only against GKE and soon EKS and rest to follow. But it works everywhere. That's yep. Your requirement is Kubernetes cluster.
Yep. So I think I'd like to add, just for folk coming in from a large enterprise and you're like wondering, how do we use this? Is it stable? All that. Your answer is the Jenkins X cloud-based distribution, as Victor mentioned, because we're making sure that out of the open source code, we take a snapshot, and that is the validation that he just talked about. So you can still use it in your enterprise environment, leverage all the cool features, and then upgrade it in a very controlled fashion, right? Change management is huge in enterprise environments, so we don't expect any less.
All right. This one came in as you were answering, Victor, and I just think it's a good follow-up, just a quick one. Does that mean that Jenkins X will also work with Kubernetes in private clouds?
Yes. If it's Kubernetes, it works.
Perfect. All right. Let's. Here's one. So,
actually,
sorry.
Very much. Just very quickly. It works in private clouds, but and this applies to anything, not only Jenkins X. Of course, if there are some external resources that needs to be installed, then you need to enable your private cloud to be able to reach those resources, like Docker images, for example, right, and stuff like that. But as long as you can pull the resources you need to install, then the short answer is yes, it works in any Kubernetes, including private cloud.
Great. On that note, one more. Is it possible for Jenkins X to integrate with on-prem tools, like Artifactory or Docker Registry, things like that?
Yes. So with some tools, integration comes out of the box, like, for example, Docker Registry, one of the two that you mentioned. Yeah, you just specify where do you keep your container images, and that's it. Jenkins X does not really care much whether it's a Docker Registry or Nexus or whatever else, Artifactory, right? It works with all of them. And any other integration, basically, some integrations are baked in, right? And you just specify one or two arguments. Other integrations are going through APIs of those applications. So as long as you want to integrate with something that has API, it should be fairly easy, straightforward, and so on and so forth. Now, if you want to integrate with something that doesn't have API, then the best thing you can do is to stop using that something.
All right. I was muted when I laughed there, but that surprised me too, that answer. Anyway, let's go on to this. So how did, during the demo, Oscar, How did Jenkins X know your GitHub credentials? Where did you set them up?
So when you install Jenkins X on top of the Kubernetes cluster, which you could create with Terraform and your other practices, Jenkins X will ask you for the GitHub bot user account that you want to use, and it will also give you a link conveniently to how to create a token in GitHub, so that basically the token is used to authenticate the bot account to do stuff, but also your personal account. So it asks you for both of those. And at that point, you're set. There's no other thing. There's a GitHub or a YAML file that Jenkins X has, which keeps track of the bot credentials and the personal account as well, with the tokens. So
if I may just expand a bit on top of it. So as Oscar said, some things are kept as secrets in your Kubernetes cluster, some applications, either secrets in Kubernetes cluster or in Vault or somewhere else. And some things and those are usually cluster-wide secrets. Now there are some things that are very personal, like which GitHub user do you want to use to create your own project. Now that is kept in your home directory on your laptop, home/.jx.
Yep.
So .jx is where local cache is kept of your personal things that are not really cluster directly related.
And in fact, if everyone's still looking at the screen I'm sharing, you can see I just did an ls on the .jx directory, and this is the file I was talking about, the git auth. If I want to kind of just show you what's there, I can do and then you can see this is what I was talking about, right? So this is Jenkins X looks at this to make sure the credentials are there for this Git provider, and it uses that. So, yep.
All right. Here's another for the demo. Has the Cool Cars application recovered?
It's a good question. Let's take a look. So I'm not sure what happened with it, but let's find out on the fly here. So if I do JX get applications and maybe try to access it because it's already apparently published, let's see what happened. Oh, it did recover. Check that out. So this is actually quite a nice surprise. This application, like I said, is more about showing you feature flags. In this staging environment, the purpose of this QuickStart is to show you that this button right here only shows up in a staging environment. So you're targeting a feature for a particular environment to show your stakeholders, like UI people or project managers, etc. Right? So think of it that way. A feature to be deployed that only is seen in the staging environment for now. Yeah, it recovered. It's right here. So there it is.
All right, we have a few to kind of touch on Jenkins X with some of these tools you've mentioned. So I'm gonna go through some, and if you wanna give a quick overview, we can. If you think maybe it's best to save it for a future demo, let us know. But for example, can you explain a little of what Scaffold is and what it does in a JX environment?
So shall I do it, Oscar?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so Scaffold is a layer on top of processes to build and deploy applications in Kubernetes, right? So it defines how to build and how to deploy an application. Like, for example, build it with Canico and deploy it with Helm, right? And it also has different profiles, so you can define, okay, so on my laptop, I'm going to build it using Docker and deploy it using, let's say, kubectl, and in production, I'm going to do it with Canico and Helm, etc., etc. So it basically defines how to build different profiles that specify how to build and deploy an application. And the reason actually why I think, so we could accomplish the same thing without Scaffold by saying, I don't know, like Docker build this image and then kubectl apply. The problem is that those tools are changing very rapidly. and likely tomorrow you're going to stop using Docker for building in your Kubernetes cluster because it's a very, very bad idea. I can imagine questions coming immediately after this. So in a production cluster, you're not going to build with Docker, and then you need to change all your configurations and everything. So Scaffold kind of helps to alleviate the pain of constant changing of how you build and how you deploy stuff.
All right. Another one would be, how is Jenkins X using Tecton?
I'll answer that. So in the first iteration of Jenkins X, before the 2.0 version, which is really when we started using officially Tecton pipelines, it was just static masters, right? But we moved away from that. And so now the default is using Tecton. Tecton is in fact the engine that runs every single pipeline in every application that you're running in Jenkins X as of the 2.0 version. That's it. So that there's no going back. We're fully invested in it. We have a great relationship with the product group at Google. In fact, quite a bit of fun, I think, in KubeCon China, right, Victor? that was pretty nice. So we got together with the team and just strategized. But know that Tecton is the only engine that we will be using as of now, and that's actually what, if you wanted to get the beauty about Jenkins X and what we've done is we've abstracted you as an end user of Tecton with all the intricacies that it has. Because if you look at a Tecton definition of a pipeline and all that, it's pretty humongous. What we've done is abstracted you from that. And my peer, Andrew Bayer, and I actually have gone back and forth on that. He's basically the one that has worked on it for a while. And it makes it simple, right? Remember we talked about this Jenkins X file here. This is the file that abstracts you from the whole intricacies of how a Tecton pipeline is defined. He takes this and merges it, and in the background there's a whole bunch of stuff, to be quite honest with you. But that's the whole point. You don't need to know Tecton to be able to use Jenkins X, as well as, I should add, you don't need to know Kubernetes or be an expert to use Jenkins X. And you see the value just keeps on compounding, right? You don't need to be an expert in all these technologies, Helm, all of these things. We create the Helm charts for you, as you saw. So there's a lot of things that happen automatically, opinionated, like Victor said, that you don't have to worry about. So we follow best practices. If you trust that we do, then your adoption rate would be phenomenal in your environment. And that's just one of those things, right? Tecton is the de facto for Jenkins X to run pipelines.
All right. Thank you for that. This next one's a bit of a two-parter. So do you have any thoughts on the best design for deploying multi-tenant applications per client? For example, is it okay to use multi-tenant in new repo or environment or pipeline for each individual client?
By client, do you mean application?
You cannot ask Max. He's not. Yeah. It's not his question.
Yeah, I know. No, they probably ask on the chat though. I'm thinking we tend to answer partially. By the way, if your application or your microservices are one service per repo, your success rate in Jenkins X is like dead on, right? There's mono repos and there's some other stuff that I think you got to tweak and it works. But as far as I know, the tried and true is one repo per service in the microservices world, and then you're golden. But Victor, what are your thoughts around that?
I'm not gonna tell you. No, so I can only assume that by multi-tenant you mean application running in different environments, which are in different clusters. And in that case, yes, you can set it up. An environment by default is a namespace in a same cluster. You can specify that it's a namespace in a different cluster or anywhere else, as long as it's some Kubernetes somewhere. It's up to you to choose how you're going to distribute your applications. And most of the other problems are basically the problems on Kubernetes itself. So if you're satisfied with your Kubernetes cluster and how it's divided and so on and so forth, then you shouldn't have any problem. And from Jenkins X point of view, there is no real restriction how you distribute your, we call them environments, but places where your applications are running.
All right, they did follow up during that, just to clarify, yes, one application for multiple clients. And just for everyone on the line, just to reiterate, if we didn't answer your question as we go, please feel free to put it back in or maybe clarify if you felt something was misunderstood.
So if it's one application for multiple clients, you're most likely, I think it goes back in line with my previous answer, is you can deploy multiple copies of the same application, different namespaces, different clusters, and so on and so forth. Sorry, Max, I interrupted you. Go on.
That's all right. Let's go to the next one. So is Jenkins X the CI/CD on top of Kubernetes? And actually, let me answer the second part. The second part is, when is the next session? And just so everyone knows, we're currently working on the timing for everything. So we'll be back in touch with everyone who's on here very soon when we have the exact date. But for now, is Jenkins X the CI/CD on top of Kubernetes?
Yes. Short answer, yes.
It's the native CI/CD for Kubernetes.
I think that this might be a good moment to expand a bit on what Oscar said about Tecton. So here's the bet, right? And we are all betting in Kubernetes world because Kubernetes world is changing so fast and so on and so forth. So the bet is, so actually, first the problem statement. Kubernetes does not have a type of a resource appropriate for CI/CD type of processes. It has deployments, which are for long running, usually stateless applications. It has stateful sets, which are for stateful applications, and so on and so forth. Kubernetes has a bunch of different resource types that you need to choose which you're going to use for your application, but nothing really for CI/CD processes. Nothing like that is very short, that lives for a very short period of time, batch-like processes, and so on and so forth. So Google folks, I mean, they started a project now, there is a community, they created Tecton for that reason, because that was needed in Kubernetes. And most likely, I cannot be 100% sure, nobody can, most likely Tecton is going to be the de facto standard for doing CI/CD in Kubernetes. And now comes the catch part. On a very low level, you're not supposed to use Tecton directly. It's not designed for that, at least not today, right? And then Jenkins X jumps on top of it and allows you to leverage whatever it allows you to leverage with a bunch of features and so on and so forth, using that as an engine. So the short answer to the question, yes, Jenkins X is a CI/CD solution on top of Kubernetes, and between Kubernetes and Jenkins X, Kubernetes, Jenkins X, there is Tecton in the middle.
Yep. I think that's really well explained, because if I'm a user, I'm a company using Jenkins X, do I have to worry about what happens with Tecton as a open source product? No, because we are abstracting you from that. You will always make sure that it works, right? And so we are taking care of that for you. I think that's important to note.
All right. Next one here is the Jenkins X Preview something similar to what Heroku's offering for preview stage?
Well, I personally have not dabbled with Heroku's previews. I definitely have used it, but maybe you, Viktor, have more insight on that.
I've worked a lot with Heroku, but the last time I worked was 15 years ago, and I'm too old to remember. I have difficulty remembering what I did yesterday.
I don't remember my social
security. Remember what?
We're on the same page.
So no, I'm kidding. I don't remember anymore exactly how it does it. So let me explain what Jenkins X does in terms of previews, and then you try to extrapolate whether that's what Heroku does or very similar. So every time you create a pull request, that pull request will be processed by a pipeline, build, test, this and that. And it will be deployed to a temporary environment that is created only for that pull request. and it will exist there and live there as long as that pull request is open. When pull request is closed, environment is destroyed. So you have as many preview environments as there are open pull requests in any given moment. That's what it does in a nutshell. Now, you try to figure out whether that's what Heroku does as well.
Yep.
All right.
If people need a comparison about Heroku's preview environments in Jenkins X, I think we're happy to do that. It's just we'd like to give you a full introduction of the Jenkins X platform before we dive into other products and comparing them, right? We want you, Victor and I, to really grasp the concepts first with Jenkins X, and then we'll explore that in future sessions. I think we're open to that,
All right. Here's one. So our organization hasn't fully latched on to using Kubernetes yet. At what point do you think we should dive in and try something like Jenkins X?
So I think actually it's very good at the very beginning. And the reason for that is because, among other things, Jenkins X makes choices for you. Like, this is how you build images. This is how you do this. This is how you do that, and so on. So like for example, this is how you deploy your applications. And the way you deploy your applications is with Helm, but not with Tiller, which is Helm counterpart in a server because it's insecure, right? So there's a lot of decisions already made for you, which you can change. But if you're just starting, then it will save you a lot of time, because figuring out all those things takes a lot of time. Right?
Well, it will save you a lot of pain too, right, Victor?
A lot of what?
A lot of pain. It will save you a lot of
Yes.
pain.
Otherwise, if you wait until you master Kubernetes, then you might be disappointed by Jenkins X telling you, you didn't figure it out right. This is how you do stuff. So your ego will be better served if you do it at the beginning.
Your ego will get in check when you start using Jenkins X. I love that.
All right, I think we have time for maybe 2 more quick ones. Do you have some?
And then I need an announcement at the end.
Oh, all right. Let's do this quick. This one probably could be spent with longer time on it, but just a quick overview. Can you walk through maybe a use case of where you would recommend Jenkins X versus standard Jenkins, some pros and cons between them?
So I'll answer it first, and then I'll let Victor. But here's the thing: if you're using microservices, you can use Jenkins X, and it will speed up your delivery process for features in your app. That's it in a nutshell.
Oh, that was quick. Okay, so I think that the reasons are very, very different for using either of those tools by design. So Jenkins works anywhere. Jenkins X works only in Kubernetes. Jenkins is unopinionated. It's a blank slate. So it tells you, here is an empty Jenkins file. You figure out what's the process. And that is great, because nobody knows what's your process, right? So Jenkins adapts to you. Jenkins X is the opposite. It says, this is the process. This is what you need to do. You can tweak it, you can change it, but you cannot get away from the process. So you need to adapt to Jenkins X. So Jenkins adapts to you, you adapt to Jenkins X. So the scope is very different. The flexibility, Jenkins is much more flexible than Jenkins X, again, by design, right? So you need to kind of accept it, kind of hug it, kind of say,
embrace it. Yeah, you gotta embrace it.
I love you as you are, type with Jenkins X. While with Jenkins, you can say, I don't like how you look like, I'm gonna change you and I'm gonna tweak you and stuff like that. It's kind of, so that's the major difference. Now, in most cases, most of the companies I work with, I cannot speak for the industry, right? But those that I work with, most likely, unless you're a relatively new company, you're going to use both. You're going to start adopting Jenkins X for things that are ready for Kubernetes, right? So Jenkins X works very well if your application is ready to be in Kubernetes. And ready does not mean only it's in container, therefore it's ready for Kubernetes. You know, smaller applications, scalable, fault tolerant, blah, 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 all those things. Cloud native, 12-factor apps, whatsoever. And then Jenkins for everything else. So I see in any foreseeable future that both of them will coexist and have different roles in organizations. Now, one more thing, last thing. I'm old. I usually, by the time I answer a question, I forget what the question was. So I don't know whether I answered it or went somewhere else.
What is the question? Yeah, I don't know.
I think we got there. It was just an example of when you'd use Jenkins X versus Jenkins. We've had a few more questions come in. We're already a minute over the hour, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Just so everyone knows, we can get these questions answered after the fact. I'm going to put my email into the chat in just a moment, and if anyone feels like they need to get something answered right away, please send me an email. So my last one before Victor's announcement that I had up my sleeve wasn't a question at all. Just want to let you know we've gotten comments on your t-shirts and people looking to get hold of some. So
create greatness. I actually, before your announcement, Victor, if we get your information, I will not only get you a shirt, I will actually get you stickers of the new Jenkins X, but you might want to have a shirt with the old school Jenkins X because that's going to be valuable in the future. That's my opinion. I mean, I apply that principle with vintage cars. So.
All right, let me know about that and about my email too. I'm about to put that in. Victor, you're up.
Awesome.
No, me. Okay, yes, me. Yeah, come to DevOps World. Come for the workshop.
Yeah.
It's not really an announcement. We said it at the beginning, but I forgot that we said it at the beginning, so I thought I need to say it again. And now, while I was saying it, I forgot that it was said. Yes, come to DevOps World.
It's okay. You're old. It happens.
Oscar will give you a discount. Oscar gives discounts.
We have 20% discount, I think, for Lisbon actually. So we will send that out. If you don't have to remember this now, but yes, Victor and I are actually doing a Jenkins X workshop in Lisbon that will walk you through hands-on all of this stuff. Some of the stuff we're covering for future webinar sessions are included, so you get it all in one day. But just know that we are excited that you are interested in this. We will progressively make these sessions more complex, so it's not just superficial. Just know that we are all about getting in the weeds of things in the terminal. There is not going to be a lot of slides. You probably saw 2 to 3. That's it. So expect that in the future. And thank you. I want to say thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to showing you more stuff in Jenkins X.
All right, well said. All 3 of us are going to be in Lisbon, so hopefully the rest of you all are too. Before we go, just a quick reminder, a very short 4-question survey is going to pop up. Just let us know what you thought and what you'd like to learn more about. It's very helpful for us. Victor, Oscar, any last words before we go?
I just want to thank everyone. Despite the fact that today I would have been without power, apparently here in the Bay Area, I actually had power this morning. So I'm glad I joined you. Thank you.
Victor, how about you?
I'm all good.
All right.
See you whenever you see me. I don't see you, so come to Lisbon.
All right, we'll be in
then
touch soon.
I'm very conflicting. I insult people in workshops. I can insult you in person. That's good.
Yeah, he tends to do that.
All right, come see us all in Lisbon, and we'll be in touch real soon about when the next one of these is. And thank you for all the questions today.
Thanks,
Until next time.
Thank you.